Hey guys, Kyle, the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for My Hero Academia Chapter 270. And ooh boy, there's a lot to talk about with this chapter. Okay, so first thing to talk about is we get a conclusive answer to the question of that a lot of us I think have been wondering for a long time, which is how All for One is even alive today, considering how long the legacy of the two brothers in quirks has existed, which is that the Doctor gave him his quirk as an offering, then replaced it with a duplicate. And that's one of those reveals that I think at this point we all kind of knew was the case, but the more terrifying part, as you learn, is that the Doctor has been conducting his research and collecting quirks even probably even longer than All for One. In fact, as was more or less alluded to in this chapter, the Doctor has been there practically since the beginning of this age of quirks, meaning he not only predicted the quirk's singularity, but if I understand context correctly, he predicted the quirks themselves. And when you look at what we've seen up to this point with the kids, what we've seen up to this point with everything, uh, it's it's hard to say that he was wrong. Honestly, everything he predicted up to this point has come to pass. So it's it really shows just the level of how much information he's managed to gather, and just how much he knows, how much he's managed to predict, and how much he himself has managed to how much knowledge he's managed to accumulate over the years. Everything he predicted would happen would come to pass has come to pass. There's no getting around it. The people who laughed at him, the people who everything he said, it's all happened. So it's like, yeah, he's really been there since the beginning of it all. Um, and yeah, let's talk about the big thing in this chapter, which is that Shigaraki has now more or less assimilated All for One into his body through sheer force of will. But it's not just All for One's quirk, but the All for One quirk, the original. So from that, we can assume the version of the All for One quirk that of the quirk All for One possessed at the time of fighting All Might was just a less stronger duplicate. So that in itself explains why All for One seemed slightly underpowered at the time. I mean, obviously All for One had medical had some was severely damaged from his previous fight with All Might already, but the fact that he also had that just a weaker version of his own quirk, it explains why he wasn't as strong as he was, as we thought he should have been. Um, but just but but that in itself just begs the question of how much stronger is the original quirk. Because if the duplicate only had a fraction of the original strength, then not only is it clear that All Might survived that encounter on pure luck, but with 120 years worth of quirks packed into the original, the world is not only about to be plunged into another dark age like what occurred when All for One was in his prime, but this time with Shigaraki standing at the top of his master's legacy. But the thing is, I really don't think Izuku, with his current level of power, will even have a chance of facing down Shigaraki as is. Like, he will be utter at this point. I thoroughly believe that if Shigaraki and Izuku were to face each other now, Izuku would be utterly decimated, defeated. Just he wouldn't stand a chance. He and it's definite and I'm not and at this point it's definitely become a very poetic cycle where, just like All Might, who gave up his power who gave up his power to Izuku in exchange for losing his power, and who grew weaker in the process and inevitably lost his power. All for One has also gave his power to Shigaraki very much in a similar way. So now, now, in many respects, the way this has all happened, the cycle has come full circle. Izuku is fully inherited. Izuku is now fully inherited basically the quirk of One for All from All Might, and Shigaraki has fully inherited the quirk of All for One from his master. And it is kind of interesting how there's and it is kind of interesting how in some ways this, and what's very interesting too, I guess, in that regard, is that I think this is also weirdly where the influence that Shigaraki takes from Star Wars kind of comes very much into play, because if because Shigaraki in a weird sense is kind of Darth, because All for One and Shigaraki were very much Darth Vader and Palpatine, but whereas All Might and Izuku in this case are kind of like Obi-Wan and Luke. So it's like it is kind of interesting how it even parallels that kind of dynamic in a way too. But yeah, but yeah, at this point, like the whole legacy. But at this point, with both of them, but at the same time, both Shigaraki and Izuku at this point have now come full circle and more or less like pretty much fully inherited the legacies of their masters. The only difference is that one probably has a little bit more training to do to fully embrace his power, whereas the other, I think, has probably embraced the current power he has at a much quicker rate, I think. Um, now, one thing I really want to dive into is how Horikoshi really cut loose with the freaky artwork and imagery in this chapter, with Shigaraki's inner psyche and showing him his family, and his family basically trying to convince him not to embrace the darkness and whatnot. Like it's like and just the whole imagery, and it's really not hard to see where Horikoshi got his inspiration from for this scene, because the contrast between this and the imagery of Peter's identity and the alien suit fighting for control in the Spider-Man comics were a clear inspiration for Horikoshi when he drew this. Like you could just in the imagery of seeing Horikoshi's family, or just seeing Shigaraki's family trying to hold him back from basically embracing the darkness of basically all for one, and how he inevitably and how he eventually fully gave into the power. It's also it's really interesting. It's really interesting how you can put those two back to back, and they really kind of line up very well. But of course, it wasn't a complete copy either, because because there was a case where when you look at that whole imagery of Shigaraki's psyche and whatnot, it's clear Horikoshi took the concept of that alien suit versus Spider-Man's identity situation, and he made it even freakier just by embracing who Shigaraki is as a character. Like literally, just by Horikoshi embracing who Shigaraki is, he turned that whole inner conflict scenario into something even freakier, even creepier, and even scarier than what Marvel did with that whole alien costume thing. Like this is the version of the alien costume. This is his version of that alien costume bit, and like I said, it's even freakier, even freakier. Like holy shit, that was kind of creepy. So yeah, let's talk about what happened at the end of the chapter, because with Izuku basically sensing Shigaraki, and as I said, I don't think Izuku at his current level of strength even has a chance in an encounter with Shigaraki. But at the same time, I think the fact that Izuku can sense him means that right now we're basically on the trajectory. It's that encounter between the two of them is on the trajectory and the path to happening as well. And if anything else, the experience of a face-off like that will definitely motivate Izuku to get stronger. But at the same time, this pushes forward even more the idea that from Shigaraki is like the first thing on Shigaraki's agenda, I imagine, especially after assimilating the power of All for One into him, is to basically finish what his master began, killing All Might. So really, when you look at everything that's being set up here, whatever happens from this point on, like the world is going to change, whether or not All Might dies or not. Like the world is going to be plunged into another dark age, like what basically All for One had plunged into long ago. And but as of right now, I don't see it really going any other way than Izuku ultimately failing to stop Shigaraki, and All Might ultimately dying. That's the only two things I think are guaranteed to happen at this point. Like it's inevitably headed down that path, I think, right now. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Oster Control. That Night of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.